Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are right now. My name is Katelyn, and I am so privileged to be here with you today. I've titled my talk this morning, The Gospel According to Proverbs. Before you look at me sideways and ask, what has Proverbs to do with the gospel anyway? Let me clarify. The gospel is God's good news to his people. Good news. That's what gospel means. We hear the word most commonly in reference to the New Testament. But the Old Testament has plenty of God's good news in it too. Today we are going to find out just how good this news is in the book of Proverbs. A few weeks ago, as I was thinking about and preparing for today, my husband Fritz shared with me a funny little story that he read on social media. A wife says to her husband, "You never listen to me." Her husband thinks to himself, well, that's a strange way to start a conversation. We have all experienced times when either we don't listen to others, maybe when someone else is monologuing for a while, like in a lecture or maybe in church, or when others don't listen to us. In one case, if we are the folks not listening well, it means that we have essentially decided that whatever the person is talking about is less important than what we have going on in our own heads. In the other case, we get frustrated when others don't listen to us, because of course we have interesting things to say. We think, why wouldn't anyone want to listen to me? What's the problem in both of these scenarios? Lack of interest. When you are not interested in what someone has to say, you don't listen well. The more interested you are, the better you listen. So good old Solomon, he had things to say. As we have learned this summer in reading and studying the book of Proverbs together, there are a lot of very good things that he said. We have talked about what money is, how to use money wisely, what wisdom is, spending time in God's creation, how to empathize and grieve with others well, wise words, good advice, and ordering our time wisely. Today I want to back up almost to the beginning of the book and explore where it is that we get this wisdom to do all of these things. There are 5 verbs, I think, that summarize Proverbs 2, 1-10 very well. The first one is listen. You have all heard of active listening. It's a popular phrase used in business settings, counseling, marriage retreats, and parenting courses. It's more than a hearing. It is listening with your body, asking clarifying, probing questions, and it requires a curiosity to understand what the other person is saying about their experiences. In other words, you are interested in what the other person has to say. Wisdom, we've seen, is a call to action. The first action here is to listen. Pay attention to the action words in Proverbs 2. Solomon is entreating his son to listen to what he is saying, not only to hear it, but to accept it, absorb it, store it up, and apply it. Why? What is he saying that is so important? One of my seminary textbooks describes wisdom as the following. Wisdom is a skill in the art of living life with each area under the dominion of God. So wisdom is not just knowledge of what to do in an instant or in a hard decision. It is knowledge of how to live life well. Let's be very clear. Knowledge in and of itself does not equal wisdom. Wisdom is an integration of all areas of life into a harmonious melody. It is a way of living that is thriving and good. It is being transformed into the image of Christ. The ancient Jews would have been deeply familiar with the law of God, and Solomon is no exception. What better wisdom than to repeat and reflect back on the very words of God through Moses? Let's look at Deuteronomy 4, verses 5-9. "See, I have taught you decrees and laws as the Lord my God commanded me, so that you may follow them in the land you are entering to take possession of it. Observe them carefully." In other words, listen well. "For this will show your wisdom and understanding to the nations, who will hear about all these decrees and say, 'Surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people.' What other nation is so great as to have their gods near them the way the Lord our God is near us whenever we pray to him? Only be careful and watch yourselves closely so that you do not forget the things your eyes have seen or let them fade from your heart as long as you live. Teach them to your children and to their children after them." This is what Solomon is doing. He is teaching his son. He has listened to God and he is teaching those words to his son. The question is, will his son listen? The question then to you is, how well do you listen to God, to others? Are you interested in hearing the voice of God? If you are, you are in the right place. The action escalates as the command turns from listening to seeking. These are desperate, urgent words, calling out, crying aloud, looking and searching. It brings to mind Jesus' words in Matthew 7:7. Keep asking and it will be given to you. Keep searching and you will find. Does anyone like puzzles? Logic puzzles, crosswords, riddles, jigsaw puzzles, sudokus, escape rooms, optical illusions, etc. If you've encountered any of these, which you have, we all have, then you'll know the frustration of not knowing the answer. You might stare at the puzzle for a long, long time without any brilliant insight as to the answer. Sometimes you have to leave and come back to it before it makes any sense. Perhaps you have to turn the puzzle, look at it from a different angle. Maybe you give up entirely. Maybe you persevere, determined not to let the puzzle get the best of you. There's a persistence to the seeking, a not giving up that drives the search, both for answers to your puzzle and for answers to the question of wisdom. Wisdom and all of its synonyms, knowledge, insight, understanding, is a treasure, like in Matthew 13:44. The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again, and then in his joy went and sold all he had and bought that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for fine pearls. When he found one of great value, he went away and sold everything he had and bought it. This wisdom is worth everything. This is the kingdom of heaven. These people are desperate for God's good treasure, which is his wisdom and his kingdom. Just like the reward of finally figuring out the answer to the puzzle, there's a rightness and a goodness in finding the treasure of wisdom. There's a beauty in the way that life clicks together, and something deep in your soul knows the rightness of it. How desperate are you for this treasure? How urgently do you seek it? Is wisdom worth your effort? It requires action and perseverance. It won't simply fall into your lap with a couple taps of your smartphone. Let me throw something else at you. Both seeking and listening are prayer. That's what prayer is, seeking and listening. And it is this listening and seeking that prepares us for our next verb. Fear. That's not what you expected, is it? It's not what I expected. But there it is, fear. Verse 5 says, "Then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God." The treasure of wisdom does not look at all like what we thought it would. But surely, after all that curious listening and urgent seeking after wisdom, surely God will grant you the wisdom you ask for in order to make the right decisions out of the many that you face every day. Right? But that's not what Proverbs says. Then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. What connection does the fear of the Lord have with our search for wisdom and understanding? For that matter, what does it mean to fear the Lord at all? And what is the knowledge of God? I believe that the best way to interpret the Bible is to use the Bible. Let's go back in Deuteronomy, this time in chapter 10. Verse 12. "And now, Israel, what does the Lord your God ask of you, but to fear the Lord your God, to walk in obedience to him, to love him, to serve the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul, and to observe the Lord's commands and decrees that I am giving you today for your own good. To the Lord your God belong the heavens, even the highest heavens, the earth and everything in it." Pastor Bruce talked about how the fear of the Lord can be translated as reverence, awe, honor, respect, and obedience. In this passage alone, we see that it also means to love him, to serve him wholeheartedly, and to observe the Lord's commands. Make no mistake, observe is not a passive observance from a distance. The call to action just grew exponentially deeper. It is no longer only curious listening and urgent seeking. This call goes far deeper into lived relationship with the very source of wisdom. In this, there is a recognition that God is more than and greater than anything we can imagine. The most powerful waterfall or storm we can witness, God created that. The most beautiful sunset our eyes have seen, God painted that. The most intricate ecosystem, plant, or insect we know of, God built that. The vastness of galaxies and supernovas as we see them now through telescopes, God made that. The warmth of a hug, a smile, or a laugh, God invented that. The details of science and art in all of the disciplines, medicine, business, carpentry, or interior design, God designed that. He is immeasurably more than anything we could ask for or imagine. So it is not wisdom in the conventional sense that we are actively seeking. It is wisdom with a capital W, God Himself. In our search for wisdom, we find none other than the God of all things. As we listen to Him and seek Him, we begin to understand our relationship to Him. We find knowledge of God. Not the knowledge that belongs to God. No, we find knowledge of God. We learn about Him. And then the Creator, the Redeemer, and the Sustainer of all things gives His very self to us. Which leads us to the next word. Receive. Receive. For the Lord gives wisdom. This relationship is a gift. Despite all our seeking and asking, we cannot make God give Himself to us, but He does so freely as a gift and in His own time. He did so through the words of the prophets spoken to His unfaithful people Israel over and over again. He did so ultimately in Jesus Christ, sending His Son to earth as a very incarnation of Himself, God in human form. He did so in sending His own Spirit to live among us, binding us together as a church and transforming us from the inside out so that we might be His presence, His wisdom on earth. God with us, Emmanuel, the greatest gift of all. Everything God gives us is a gift. Just like our puzzle analogy earlier, suddenly without any explanation, the puzzle might become clear to you, and you wonder why you ever found it difficult in the first place. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. From His mouth come knowledge and understanding. He breathes wisdom, just like He breathed life into His creation. Once you see God and His glorious self-revelation, you can't unsee Him. You simply open your hands and you receive this gift. We receive Him. In our culture of you want it, you gotta earn it, this is incredibly difficult. The fact is, you can't do anything to earn God's gift of Himself. To do so is to say that God's gift was not enough, and that somehow we can one-up Him by working harder and depending on ourselves. So if I can't do anything to earn God's gift of Himself, nothing on my own, His wisdom, I can't get that myself, then why do I bother listening and seeking at all? It's about relationship. It's about coming to understand who God is and who I am, who you are in relation to Him. It is understanding that He is God and I am not, and that is a very good thing. That is the fear of God. It is about Him extending an invitation to each of us to participate in His work in an ever-loving community and in the world that He has created. Now, verses 7 and 8 in chapter 2 can turn things all topsy-turvy. This is the part where it seems like God gives us a reward for listening, seeking, and knowing Him. But does that make sense, given what we just talked about? What if we read it like this? He holds success in store for the upright. He is a shield to those whose walk is blameless. He guards the course of the just, and He protects the way of His faithful ones. The emphasis is not on what he does for us, but on who he is for us. The Bible is a book about God, and it just said some really cool things about him. Things that are most certainly worth listening to. The blessing or reward we receive for our search for God is his presence. It is not about protection, health, safety, or prosperity. It is only always about him. This does not mean that the Christian way is easy, but rather that in all things our God is with us, beside us, in us. Going back to Deuteronomy 10, we can read in verse 15, all the way back at the very beginning, "Yet the Lord set his affection on your ancestors and loved them, and he chose you, their descendants, above all the nations as it is today. Circumcise your hearts, therefore, and do not be stiff-necked any longer. For the Lord your God is a God of gods and Lord of lords, the great God, mighty and awesome, who shows no partiality and accepts no bribes." This is the God that we listen to, the God we seek, the God we get to know. This is the God that we fear. He is above all, yet he came down to us. He is God with us. When we internalize this message, this God with us relationship, we rest in it and live out from it. This is the last word of the 5 words, act. This is our response to God's amazing gift of himself. Our worldview changes, our priorities change, we are made new, transformed from the inside out, and it is a source of joy. It is very good. But remember, God's news is not just for you. It is for you, but is also for all people. His mandate to Israel is still the same to us today. Love him and love others. Wisdom and love do absolutely no good if kept to yourself. You will understand what is right and just and fair, every good path. This way of life becomes second nature when we steep ourselves in God's presence, his gift to us. Wisdom enters our hearts. It changes us. We become generous with our money, empathetic to those who mourn, gentle in our speech, joyful in creativity, patient with our advice, and wise with our time. At the beginning of the summer, Pastor Bruce said, the key to wisdom is that we put it into practice. We have heard all summer about how to put it into practice, but friends, if you aren't listening to the source of wisdom, if you aren't seeking him or knowing him, fearing him, or receiving his good gifts with an open hand, then I'm afraid we have it all backwards. Wisdom with a capital W transforms us into new people and empowers us to live differently, to live wisely. This is the gospel, the good news of God. Are you interested in that? Do you want to seek that treasure? Do you want to know this God wholeheartedly? You can. You can. He gives himself to you freely. He only asks one thing in response. You, all of you, for the willingness to be changed by his presence and to live out this wisdom in the world. That's called worship. It's called surrender. I'll leave you with Romans 12, verse 1. Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer yourselves as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship.